We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to Zencaster.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Sisters Assembled. If y'all have been paying any attention, we are super close now to Deadpool and Wolverine. Last week, we covered all things cameo with one kind of glaring exception that we're going to rectify this episode. And now we are doing our official predictions for the film. So, because we have a lot to talk about, I'm going to go ahead and let Katie get started and talk about the one cameo that I'm shocked we both missed.
It's not even that we both missed it, because right after we finished recording, I was like, Taylor, we didn't say this. And it was already right after we were done. Obviously, a huge rumored cameo, guys, is Channing Tatum as Gambit. He was casted as Gambit for, I think, around the 2014 area to play the character and to possibly have his own movie. It never happened. We don't really know all the reasons. It kind of just fell flat. It has been 10 years. Obviously, Channing looks a little different. He's aged 10 years. But I think we can all agree that that's a huge rumored cameo, especially considering Ryan Reynolds would love to finally bring somebody like that onto the screen. Channing Tatum was a huge, huge fan of the character, really wanted to play it, was really adamant about playing it. So we did forget that, and by forget, we forgot on the recording, but right after I was like, Taylor, we never said this, and we should have.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hinted at it, but I think we're both pretty much in alignment that, yes, we think that this cameo is going to happen. It's too meta and fun not to be included by Ryan Reynolds. We talked about this last episode. The more meta it is, the funnier it is. And this is right up Ryan's alley in terms of his type of humor when it comes to this character. So I think we're both in agreement that, yes, Channing is going to make a small cameo in some respect as it relates to playing Gambit, because he never got to do it on screen 10 years ago.
Agreed. Yes. As you said, I am fully on board.
All right. And then the last thing from last episode that we just want to quickly clarify, there are kind of two rumors going around when it comes to Blade. There is the idea that Wesley Snipes is going to be in the film reprising his role, which is, again, even funnier because Ryan was in that franchise with Wesley in the early 2000s, or was it late 90s? Either way, in that kind of area or time frame. But the other rumor that we want to quickly clarify, that we kind of mixed them up and kind of combined them last episode, was that shot where you see someone in the background who looks like Blade. Y'all know what we're talking about. It's one of the stills that have been released from the movie. That is actually a still, potentially, and everyone seems to think, of the TV show Blade. So I know last episode we kind of mixed up the two and combined them, but it's two separate rumors. We might have TV Blade and also potentially Wesley Snipes Blade because of the connection with Ryan Reynolds. So as I was editing that, I just wanted to make that quick clarification for anybody who listened to that episode. That's also a great time for us to say, if you haven't listened to our cameo episode, please go back and check that out, because we're not really going to be talking about a ton of cameos in this episode since we gave it its own. and covered that already last week. So this week is really going to be very focused on what we think is going to happen in the film, some of the character backgrounds that might be new to the MCU and to the franchise. So that's what we're going to focus on today. But just wanted to give those two quick little updates from last week's episode.
With that being said, let's get into Deadpool and Wolverine, which I know we're all so excited about. I mean, I'm still thinking back to the Super Bowl when they dropped the first trailer, and I remember they were like, go on YouTube. So we were all sitting there instead of watching it on the big TV because we didn't turn off the game, on my little phone gathered around trying to all watch it. So we are obviously super hyped for this. We are almost there. And I think we should just get into it because this movie is crazy.
Yeah.
The things we've heard about the movie is crazy. And I mean, first off, the big overwhelming umbrella thing that has come out from this is it sounds like this is ushering in the mutants. This is the age of the mutants right here.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin has come out and said, hey, it all starts with Deadpool and Wolverine, which I think we all kind of maybe guessed, having Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. I don't think he's going to be the Wolverine, moving forward in the MCU. We've talked about that. We fan cast the character. I think that's a given. This really should be his last time in the role. I know we all said that about Logan, but putting Logan aside, this is probably it. With that being said, with what Kevin confirmed, we all now know this is going to start the official X-Men. Now, what does that mean for the X-Men that we've seen thus far? I think we all knew that Charles Xavier coming in MOM, that wasn't it. What does that mean for the X-Men that we saw at the end of the Marvels? I'm not sure. If this is the official start, Kevin, what are we doing with those guys? I mean, are they just another set? That's fine, but that's one question that comment from him really opened up for me.
I think it's almost the other end from me. And it's more of, yes, this is the start. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here. But Taylor and I were just talking before we started recording. A lot of the early reactions from people who have seen early previews have been saying that a lot of the trailer pieces are really only from the first half of the movie. Remember, this is an over 2-hour movie. So keeping that in mind, we do all see them go through a Doctor Strange mystic portal. Doesn't have to necessarily be Doctor Strange's portal itself, but we all see that mystical magic right there. I don't want to jump ahead in any of this way, but is it possible they end up in the universe in which we saw the Marvel's X-Men? Is that where we end up? And so we are ushering in the X-Men and we're connecting those pieces. I do wonder if that's kind of where that goes, because otherwise it looks like a lot of this movie is actually in the void.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point that this could be the great connector of all things, which would be great. I think that's something that we've talked about a lot, especially as it relates to phases 4 and 5, is kind of everybody's out here doing their own thing, and we're not even getting like little tiny connectors to show where folks are like interacting with one another. Like, it's been very sparse. And especially as it relates to the multiverse, it has been very much like, now you're in this universe, now you're in that universe, and it's like disparate, right? There's not a lot of connection. And especially as it relates to a franchise as big as the X-Men, I think it is super important to connect them in a really meaningful way. And I'm hoping that this is that moment. But I mean, honestly, this movie, to your point, is so crazy. I don't even know that I have a firm grasp on what is going to happen. Like, to your point, we've only seen probably footage from the first half of the film in the trailers, which means there's a whole back half that's going to go absolutely nuts that we have literally zero insight into. And I think that's going to be where the bulk of probably what we're going to end up talking about in the reactions comes from. And we have literally no idea what it is.
Yeah, we definitely don't. But I feel like we kind of have a better idea of the first half. Because if that is true, if the first 40 minutes is really everything we've seen in the trailers, if that's it, and we do have a whole second half, we have an idea of the start of this movie, right? The very first trailer that drops, we see Wade Wilson, Deadpool himself, at a birthday party, celebrating his birthday with everybody we've seen in a lot of the other movies. Obviously, we see Vanessa, some of the X-Force. So we're bringing back some of these, reoccurring characters, or some of them being reoccurring characters from Deadpool to Deadpool 2, and now Deadpool and Wolverine. And then he gets kidnapped by TVA. That's a very clear time. We see them rip off his toupee. We know that happens. he goes to the TVA. I think that's an important component to bring into this. We can't forget that the Loki TVA is in this movie. Now, I think the question is it the Loki TVA? Because don't we have constant debates about, are there technically multiple TVAs that could exist, or is there really one? Because at this point, Loki has proven there is no TVA, not the way we knew it.
Yeah, I was hoping we could avoid this conversation, but unfortunately, I don't think we can.
I
So
don't think we can either.
it's tough because the article that I was reading was comparing Paradox basically to Mobius, or I should say Paradox and Deadpool's relationship to Mobius and Loki, in the sense that, like, he's his liaison. Paradox is Deadpool's liaison to the TVA, right? He's kind of using him as a consultant. I think what's important to point out is, regardless of the multi TVA conversation, there is clearly some deception going on, right? Because he says to him, like, we want you to come in and save this and do all this stuff. And you hear Paradox explain to him the situation of the Wolverine that we're going to be following in this film. And then next thing you know, Deadpool is ripping through some TVA agents. So I guess it's interesting because that also, like, no matter where the TVA shows up, they're an antagonist, because Paradox is probably going to manipulate Deadpool into thinking one thing about our Wolverine. I think the other thing to think about is, what are the ramifications of the end of Deadpool 2? And that's kind of how they get him in their employ, same way that we saw, Loki pull his little stunt when he goes back to 2012, or when he gets the Tesseract in 2012. So there's a lot going on just even in that first, like, 45 seconds of the trailer. You can start to put things together based on what we saw in Loki. It's going to be crazy in terms of, like, the actual whether there are multiple TVAs. There are two options here. Either yes, there are multiple TVAs, which I personally don't think there are, just based on what we learned about them, right? If they were snipping universes before they became universes, branches before they became universes, right? That's kind of what we've settled on as the running theory. If they were snipping them, then they really should only be one TVA that has access to every universe in the multiverse, right? So that's my personal opinion on the multiple TVA question. But then if you're saying there's only one TVA, I think the next thing is, well, where are we falling in the timeline then? Because to your point, after Loki season 2, there really isn't a need for a TVA, because Loki's out here manning the chair, literally, to make sure that the multiverse is running smoothly and that there is a multiverse. So it's tough because, one, the fact that we have a multiverse is telling me this has to be post Loki season 2, because there are multiple universes. But at the same time, to have a fully functional TVA post Loki season 2 doesn't really make sense with what happened at the end of Loki season 2.
Right, which is why this all comes back to my favorite question of, when do things fall on the timeline? Because this seems to be an ongoing issue for us, especially with the Loki show. I think we also have to bring into the conversation that probably the biggest rumor for ever, really, ever since this movie was announced, was that Mobius would be in this. And so we can't forget that either, that we saw how he ended in Loki season 2. And now, and again, that could be who knows where, but now he could be making an appearance in this movie. And that can't be forgotten either. So I do think there's a lot of levels to this conversation. You pointed out how at some point Deadpool is ripping through TVA agents and absolutely demolishing them. So clearly there is that antagonistic view, like you were saying. So how do we get there? We initially know that the TVA brings him in because sounds like his world's going to crap. I don't know how. We haven't really been introduced to that. We aren't really sure how that's happening. Maybe an incursion, but that doesn't seem like that can be solved by him. So has to be something smaller, but still, like, obviously very serious. That is what sets Deadpool on this track, right? This is what has him go after Logan, Wolverine. I think the next question here, because I don't want to delve into the TVA aspect more than what we just did. I don't know the answers to them, and I don't know how big of a role they're going to end up playing here. But my bigger question then is, how many versions of this Wolverine are we getting? Because we could have him in the same universe as Deadpool. Let's just call it, I know there's a name for it, but we're going to call it Universe A. Universe A is Deadpool's. This is the one we've seen: Deadpool, Deadpool 2. Okay. This Wolverine could be in his own universe, could be in Universe A. He could also be in Universe B, and Deadpool is now put into another universe to talk to him, to do whatever he needs to do to have him help him save his universe. We could get multiple versions of Wolverine that aren't variants of Hugh Jackman, I should say, because I think there's kind of a little bit of a weird conversation there because obviously the Spider-Men all look different, but then you have Doctor Strange who all look the same. So we could get multiple variants of a Hugh Jackman Wolverine, which we also have to remember that not every shot of Hugh Jackman in this trailer could be the exact same Wolverine. So there's levels to this conversation.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point. The fact that we can literally trust no version of any character to be the, like, character, like the one that we think we're watching at any point in any of these trailers. In terms of what you were saying about multiple Wolverines, I don't think we're going to get the Wolverine that belongs in Deadpool's universe, personally. I think we're going to really stick to this Hugh Jackman Wolverine. I'm going to call him Universe B, as kind of how you were referring to him. I think we're going to get primarily Universe B Hugh Jackman Wolverine, and then one or two other variants that aren't Hugh Jackman, and here's why. Knowing that this is probably his last time playing the character, I don't think they want to establish him as a Wolverine in yet another universe, especially one like Deadpool's where they're potentially going to continue telling stories. Like, I don't think Ryan Reynolds, for example, is done playing Deadpool after this. I also don't know that he's going to full-time move into 616. I think it's safe to say that Deadpool's movies universe is what we're calling Universe A. It's not 616, right? I think that's pretty fair. With that in mind, is he going to permanently come over to 616? I'm not sure. Is he going to dabble or move between 616 and what we're calling Universe A? Very possibly. But if he does spend time in both Universe A and 616, I have a hard time believing that they're going to establish that, although I guess haven't they already established Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in that universe because of all the references to Logan?
Right. Well, and also, just to interrupt while you've been saying this, don't forget the TVA sat there and was showing Deadpool all of our MCU movies. I mean, they weren't movies. They were obviously the moments in his... They were obviously real moments here, but for us, they're what we're seeing as the movies, which is aka our universe, because you cannot tell me another universe has the exact same moments all there.
Well, right, but don't forget, the TVA has access to what's going on in every universe. So I still don't think that means that Deadpool is...
Yes, but I'm just saying there's clearly going to be crossover into there has to be crossover into 616 if they're showing him this.
No, totally, and I agree with you there. I just don't know that he's going to permanently come into 616 and spend all the rest of his movies in 616, or if he'll still have his universe that has been established in Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 and come over to 616. Like, we all think he's going to, you know, at some point cross over with Tom. That's cool, that's fine. But, like, I still don't believe that the universe that we've been established to see in Deadpool 1 and 2 is 616.
I think it's possible. I think it's hard because in his universe, we have the X-Men, because as we have now figured out, well, not figured out, but we've both actually now seen the full Days of Future Past and at First Class and all of those 4 movies that have been made now in the 2010s, which personally I'd only seen bits and pieces of each of them. We know we have X-Men there. We don't have Avengers. We know that he's going to go somewhere there's going to be Avengers because a portal opens and Doctor Strange is an Avenger. Whether he's evil or not, we know he is part of the Avengers side of comic books. That's just a fact. So I think he's going to straddle them. This still goes back to, could he end up in a third universe where there are X-Men that are not his X-Men, that are going to be new X-Men, that eventually when something like Secret Wars happens, we could collide with them and that's how we bring them in. I know we've talked about that before, which could be the Marvels when they ended up there in that universe. I think now that we have universes A, B, C, D, like I think we have quite a few. I do think he'll straddle both though. My question's going to be, will they continue too much in his though? Just because Marvel's not going to want to keep bringing back the X-Men First Class cast. They're going to want their own. So I think that's going to be a weird question now that you're really bringing Deadpool into the fold.
Yeah, you know, I think this brings up a couple of things because to your point, they're not going to necessarily want to continue 21st Century Fox's universe because now they have access to all of these other characters that 21st Century Fox did not. They're not going to want to bring back necessarily the X-Men First Class cast, as you were saying, because again, they're going to want to establish their own. Like, there's a lot of other variables here. I think what we've talked about that kind of relates to this is, if Deadpool's universe is kind of on the brink of collapse because of what he's done in Deadpool 2, going back and changing the timeline and saving people, obviously Vanessa and the X-Force. Like, if that's the case, they have an easy out to destroy that universe and force him to make that move into 616 as basically a safe haven. Now, does he bring the rest of those recurring characters back? I don't know who makes the jump with him. I think that's the end of this film, is the resolution, if you want to call it that. It's kind of a weak resolution, not narratively, but weak as in like he doesn't get what he wants, is that he, instead of being able to save his own universe, is going to be able to potentially take the people he loves and cares about and move them over to 616 where it's safe. I think that's a very viable option in terms of how this movie nets out, and he officially joins 616 on a full-time basis. That's one route. Again, the other route is maybe they do find a way to continue in his universe. I mean, they did a good job basically of keeping the Evan Peters and Nicholas Holtz of the world, other than pretty much one scene, out of both Deadpool movies. Do they just continue with Teenage Negasonic Warhead and Colossus, and those are his only two X-Men that he really interacts with for the rest of his movies? And he still gets to, make that jump between 616 and his universe? Very possible. I'm kind of leaning towards the former now that we've had this conversation, and saying like, look, I think at the end of the day, his universe is going to collapse and he's going to go ahead and make that permanent jump to make 616 his home with whoever he's able to save from his kind of inner circle.
I think you said it right there. And I actually think we can kind of combine both of what you were saying and what I was saying into one little thing. This is a trilogy, guys. No, it's not called Deadpool 3, but it is the third installment. And let's not forget, Marvel always has their character lose something in order to grow at the end of their trilogy. Thor lost his hammer, Cap lost his shield, Tony blew up all his suits.
Spider-Man lost his whole identity.
Yes, that did happen to poor Peter Parker. He lost everything. So let's not forget, these are kind of our precedents when talking about this. I think they will actually have him lose his universe. I think it's the easiest way to move away from all of that. Move away from everything 21st Century Fox has done, because I think, as somebody who's watching some of this for the first time in supposed timeline order, whoa. Whoa, guys.
Deadpool makes sense. Like those 1, 2. Cool. Got it. The X-Men, my friends, Katie and I are working off the same list, and no.
Yeah. So I would not be shocked if they want to tank that. And to be fair, Deadpool is really the only last connecting thread. So they can tank that by killing his universe off. Now, where this could connect further is, remember, I've been saying there is a mystical portal that appears that we're saying is a whole second act. Well, he could be still straddling some universes between 616 and maybe that other X-Men universe that we're still trying to figure out where it plays in. I mean, I'm sorry, but you don't bring Kelsey Grammer back as the Beast for a single end credit cameo like that, especially when you leave one of our characters who's supposed to be becoming somebody pretty important in the future in that universe. You just don't do it. So I do wonder if that's maybe the universe he lands in, and he is with a bunch of the X-Men. Remember, the Wolverine here lost all his X-Men. So that could be a really good kind of, I don't want to say endpoint, but could be really a nice resolution for both characters. Then eventually being brought fully into 616, that could happen as well. Before we get into this in a way that's going to hurt our brains, I think we got to focus on the bigger elephant in the room still, which is what we've seen in the trailer. It looks as if 90% of that is in the void with Eliath.
Yeah, from what I was reading, they're calling it like the Wasteland. I don't know if that's like the official name or they're just describing it as a wasteland, but I think there's another person we need to really bring up when it comes to these scenes, because they seem like the leader and also a very important person, probably the main antagonist, and has some serious connections to Charles Xavier. So let's talk a little bit about Cassandra Nova. What an interesting person. They are a Mama Dry. I have a moo dry. I have no idea how you say that. But essentially, they are a parasite. And in the womb, they were able to, I'm sorry, in the womb with Charles Xavier, let's just put that out there. They were able to essentially create a corporeal form and become his twin opposite. Basically, everything that Charles is, Cassandra is the opposite, but his female twin genetically. So that's a lot. That is a lot. But I also want to add that they do have the power of telepathy and telekinesis. So we see that actually in the trailer where they're moving Wolverine's limbs for him because they have those powers. It's a lot. And I am really curious to see how this plays in. I also think that's interesting when we talked a lot about last episode, like, are we going to see Charles? Well, I don't know that we need to see Charles because we've got what is essentially not a variant, but working in the same role as what would be a Charles Xavier variant already in this film.
And in the comics, this character is pretty ruthless, which I don't think we get to see a lot of that in the trailers just yet. But I think it's important to put out there because let's not forget, too, to add into this, that we were talking about Onslaught during X-Men 97, which is pretty much another version of Charles, kind of his mind going a little AWOL and creating its own thing. Granted, now that was a mix of him and Magneto's mind that is created. We have not yet seen it, but that was something we were talking about as a possible rumor, as something we thought could be happening in the series at some point. So now we have Cassandra Nova, and I'm going to bring us back to this, in the void, in the wasteland, whatever you want to call it. So I'm wondering if that's the way of saying not supposed to exist, not normal, because what are we taught most of the time, right, guys? At least from Loki, if it still stands. You end up in the void by getting pruned because you're not supposed to be in existence, or you did something or created a timeline. Now, granted, again, where are we? I don't know. But that was kind of the thought process in at least the season 1 version of Loki was you get pruned and sent to this wasteland, to this void when you're pretty much a wrong variant.
Well, and let's not forget, too, what are they living inside but a gigantic giant man's skull?
Well, it's not just his skull. Like, that guy's entire body is sitting there. But we also had a massive yellow jacket head in one of the Loki seasons. Well, it would have had to be Loki season 1 since that's the only one we went to the void in.
Yeah, so definitely feels like that's where we are. And that in some universe, Scott Lang gets, or I mean, I guess it could be Hank Pym too,
True.
depending on the universe, gets absolutely demolished and dies in giant man form. I mean, heck, it could have even happened during Civil War. I hate thinking about that. But that to me says, all right, yeah, this is where we're living. They are not supposed to be alive. They are not. I mean, Charles doesn't have a twin, period. The end, as far as I know. He is an only child, I think. Except for, well, isn't Colossus his stepbrother or half-brother?
You mean Juggernaut?
Yes, sorry. They're both large men. Isn't Juggernaut his half-brother?
Yes, I believe he's his half-brother.
Okay, so he has no full siblings as far as I am aware. Definitely doesn't have a twin as far as I'm aware. So anyway, Cassandra, not supposed to exist, is probably the main antagonist. I don't know exactly what that means, considering we also have the TVA, we also have multiple universes. Are we going to go to the Wolverine's universe and fight whatever, happened to his universe and killed his X-Men? I don't know. I guess what I'm getting at by listing all of these different conflicts is, what is the main conflict of this film?
Yeah, I think we know Deadpool's is his universe is collapsing. It's falling apart.
Right.
We know why he's driven. Whether or not we understand how we get there, that's a different story. But I do think, they've made that pretty clear. I think as far as Wolverine, that's also difficult because this man was kind of just wallowing in self-pity when Deadpool came across him. So I think that's going to be very difficult. And as we were saying, if there are multiple versions that we see across different areas, because how do they end up in the void? Then that's the next question. Do they end up there because they're pruned? How are they pruned? Because if this is the Loki season 2, TVA, technically, they shouldn't be getting pruned. So how do they end up there? I think this all culminates in they jump through this portal. Does somebody tell them to jump through the portal? Or do they just see this portal and jump? That's a huge question. Because does Wong, the Sorcerer Supreme from 616, tell them to go through this portal, show up, tell them to go through this portal? Do we hear his voice and they jump? What are they running from? Here are my conflicts. This is what I want to know. Is that what happens when they go through this portal? And what's the second half of this? Does Cassandra follow them? Do other people from the void, who, don't forget, guys, a lot of characters are being called back here that are already confirmed, some of which we didn't talk about in our Cameo Fest episode because we didn't need to. You see them in the trailers, you know they're there. Pyro. I mean, you've got the old Sabretooth, who we see a battle, obviously, and it comes with at some point. You see Toad from the OGs. There's a lot of people they call back. So do they follow through this portal? We don't know. But if Cassandra follows through, then yes, main antagonist is there. But the only shots we've had of her so far are in the void.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting at, is like, we understand what Deadpool's motivation is, but is he mainly fighting the TVA? Is he mainly fighting Cassandra? Is he also fighting whatever Wolverine was fighting in his universe? Like, there are a lot of like mini conflicts to get him to his end goal, which again, I don't think we think he's going to accomplish. He's going to find kind of a pivot, I guess. In doing that, he's coming in conflict with Cassandra, with the TVA. So what exactly is going to end up? I know people are saying Cassandra's the main antagonist, but what is their motivation? Like, what are they trying to accomplish to put them in conflict with Deadpool? Like,
well, that's why I wonder if it has to deal with how they got to the void. Because going off of this theory that I'm putting out, if we are post Loki season 2, nobody should be going to the void, right? Does the void even technically, should the void even exist? I don't know. I'm not even going to go there. But theoretically, nobody should be getting sent there anymore because nobody's getting pruned. Eliath is alive and well, but nobody should be getting sent there anymore. So I wonder if Deadpool and Wolverine end up there by sheer accident, because knowing these two, that's gonna happen. At some point, they cross the TVA. We don't know when. The scene of him going after the TVA agents and literally just demolishing them is a completely different scene than anything we've seen in the rest of the trailer.
yeah.
The setting is completely different. It's the first and only time we see that setting, that like snowy forest that may or may not be a callback to some other X-Men movies. That's it. So I do wonder if whenever they get sent to the void or end up in the void, that's like a ding, ding, ding for Cassandra, because I would assume their character would want out. If I'm a villain, I'd want out of being stuck there. And so somehow Wolverine and Deadpool get out, because guess what? That's the portal.
Yeah.
There it is. I would also think she wants from them to figure out how they got in if nobody was coming into the void anymore.
I also wonder, and this goes back to some of our cameo discussions, but there are obviously Doctor Stranges in every universe. Doctor Strange in every universe is a demon to the multiverse. Is there a Doctor Strange where he is stuck in the void because of something he did that was quasi evil and not, on the sacred timeline, quote unquote, if we're going back to that concept, or the sacred circle, whatever you want to call it? But if that's the case, and maybe he didn't have a sling ring before, but, our good friend Wade picks up a fancy piece of jewelry, and now we have a Doctor Strange who has a sling ring, like, that's another way to do it. Like, is there a pre-existing Doctor Strange or Wong? I'm not partial to either. I just would say more likely that Doctor Strange is in the void than Wong, because Wong is way less problematic.
Yeah.
But is that what happens? Is that they find someone like a Doctor Strange within the void to help them get out? Maybe he makes it out then too. Now you have an evil doctor. I don't want to complicate things further, but if you're setting up future storylines and things like that, I know we have a lot going on with our Doctor Strange. He's got the third eye right now. And that's not a good idea. And then you have Clea and the idea of incursions. But I think we've seen, there's opportunities with other Doctor Stranges to be evil. Is our Doctor Strange the one who's going to be Doom's right-hand man in Secret Wars? I don't know. Maybe we introduce this guy and it's this guy. I'm just talking out of left field now. But all I'm saying is there's a lot of opportunities. The portal doesn't have to be opened from the other side. It could actually be opened from the void if the right elements and ingredients are brought together.
I think that part, that last sentence, is a really good point, is that it could be open within the void, which I think was being overlooked a lot, even by us. I think it's a lot easier to say, yeah, somebody was opening it from the other side, but why?
Yeah, how would they even know that Deadpool and Wade needed them? Like, thinking about even just the shot itself, it looks like, from my perspective, they're jumping out of Ant-Man's face, like an eye hole or something, right? Like, they're in whatever Cassandra's, like, lair is, and they're making that jump. If that's the case, how does some rando magic wielder in whatever universe they're going to, let's just say for argument's sake it's 616, so how does either our Doctor Strange, who might not even be on 616 right now, I'm not sure, that was a little unclear, but our Doctor Strange or Wong, how do they even know that Deadpool and Wolverine need their help? It has to be exceptionally well timed. They're jumping into space, not space, but like air. And yes, they can both heal, and nothing's really fatal to either one of them, but still, you have to time it really well. It's a coordinated attack, quote unquote, or a coordinated effort. How the heck are they talking to people in 616, for example, who have magic who can coordinate that portal opening at exactly the moment they need it?
Another good point. I think this is that culminating point of, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because as we've been saying this entire time, if what we're seeing in these trailers have really only been part of this movie, everything else happens when they jump through this portal to we don't know where. And it really could be anywhere. And that's, I think, the problem is we don't know. I think ideally I'd love it to be 616. I think they've added a lot of Easter eggs that make us think it could highly be 616. I don't know. But then we also have the question of, if it's 616, how do we know? Is it going to be subtle, or are we going to have somebody show up who is like, hey, and we're just like, oh crap, like this is it. Like they're in 616. Like this just happened.
Well, and even think about it this way, depending on how you choose to do the variant, whether it's the Loki Doctor Strange route where it's the same character playing, with the exception of Sylvie, the same character playing multiple variants of the same character, or I'm sorry, the same actor playing multiple variants of the same character, or you go the Peter Parker route where you have 3 different dudes over 3 different decades, it might be, let's say, I know we talked about Thor being in it, right? There's the rumor of Thor having a cameo. It could be Chris Hemsworth, but it could be a Thor from a completely different universe.
Right.
And we would never know because Chris could be our Thor or a whole different Thor. I wonder, I mean, I think the other thing we have to think about when it comes to Deadpool that makes him a very special character is he's a fourth wall breaker. So he could just come out and tell us.
And be like, suddenly I'm in your universe.
Exactly. Like he's already calling himself the Marvel Jesus. So like he's fully aware of what's going on.
And he references Kevin Feige in the movie.
Exactly. Exactly. So the thing that I want to point out here is where, all of this is theoretical and that's great. But there's a whole other variable that comes along with this character, which is that he is fully aware of 1, the multiverse, 2, the fact that he's in a movie, and 3, the absurdity of it all. And so that adds a whole layer of what else is he going to tell us just because he's, shooting off his mouth and being the merc with the mouth. And what are we going to learn from that? And how much of that can we take to heart versus how much do we take with a grain of salt? So I didn't want to end this episode without, mentioning the fourth wall breaking aspect of this character because I think that's going to be huge, especially in a multiverse focused movie.
That's a great point. And it is really important for this character, but also just this. I mean, again, he references Kevin Feige by even saying like, obviously it's in a conversation about cocaine, but he's like, Kevin straight up said like, I can't do that. Like that's the one thing he said I wasn't allowed to do. So let's not forget. That's a great point. It's a good thing to remember. And before we end the episode with, again, guys, I'm not sure how much we were able to predict more than we just asked a lot of questions. We have to do end credits.
Yep.
Now, Deadpool and Wolverine, it has been confirmed there's only one. And when this movie is as big as it is, my thought process is the end credit might be very little. If you have a movie that is going to be opening so many doors, hopefully, fingers crossed, seems like that's the direction we're going. Do you need an end credit that's going to shock everyone when the movie itself might have been doing that job?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And honestly, that's kind of where I was leaning when I was thinking about this, because let's think about what the end credits were in Deadpool movies in the past. Deadpool 1's end credit scene, he rolls out in a bathrobe and he says a lot of BS, and then he says, by the way, Cable's gonna be in the next one. All he does is say, this is what's gonna be in my sequel. Deadpool 2, it is important because it sets up this movie, but it's basically him messing around with the time watch, going back and undoing the deaths of all of his friends and Vanessa. So, with that being said, was he limited because he was living in the Fox universe and he only had, maybe 3 whole characters that they would give him real rights to? For sure. But knowing the Deadpool character, I think he's gonna mess with us and pull the same exact stuff or similar stuff and say, yeah, you waited because this was a crazy movie and you wanted to see how much more I could bump up the ante. Well, lol, here's something dumb. Here's something of me playing with dog pool or something weird or bizarre that's going to set up maybe a Deadpool 4. I don't think Ryan Reynolds is done. Maybe it sets up his next solo film. Maybe, I mean, okay, the craziest thing I think he'll do if he does something really nuts is maybe Tom Holland makes an appearance.
Stop
as
it, because
Spider-Man.
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Other than that, it's going to be something super low key where they're just trolling us for sitting there. That's my thought.
So I hate, and we all know this, I hate agreeing with Taylor on things, especially end credits, only because, no, I want us to be able to have different thoughts and like put different things out there so we have a bigger chance of being right. However, that is kind of my thought process as well, is that if this movie is as big as it's being made out to be, and not just by the people in the movie either. Like Kevin Feige's out here saying like this is the start of the X-Men for us. So if that is what's happening, then I do think it doesn't make sense to have a huge end credit. We don't need it. I think this is going to be very like we just ended Across the Spider-Verse. Did we need something beyond that? No. We were all sitting there like, holy crap, that just happened. So I agree in that way. I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. My only other theory was if it's going to be something, I was actually more specifically going to go, especially because, and I get it, these movies are filmed, the timeline's ahead of it. I understand that. However, especially because Venom is also coming out this year, it would be hilarious if Deadpool essentially reenacted what happened at the end of Venom 2 when Venom got transported into our universe and saw Tom Holland Spider-Man. Because think about how freaking hilarious that is, especially now that we're all like, so did that all happen for nothing? Because he got sent right back? Like, I think that would be so funny because not only are you poking fun at possibly Sony's failure of carrying this over, but also there is Tom Holland and he's him and Deadpool have a massive friendship / relationship of working together. They're friends from work, as Thor and Hulk are. Like, they're work buddies. So thinking about all of that from the comics, like, I feel like you have a really good chance of having him there, and reenacting that would be hilarious.
Well, not to mention, we haven't seen Tom in almost 2 years now. So, or was that the end of 2021? So almost 3 years. So it's been a long time.
Right. So we haven't seen him in almost 3 years. And how funny would it be? Even what if we never got a full confirmation he's actually in 616 until we see him watching TV and he sees this little Spider-Man?
Well, yeah, because that would be the one character who, by showing the character, you know exactly what version it is.
Right. And you just see Spider-Man on TV and he's sitting here in his bed like, oh my God, I have to find this person.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Obviously in Ryan Reynolds' flair, but
that would be so fun. I would die. I think I would like scream if that happens.
I'd lose it.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like, that would be kind of the thing, is it's like, it's nothing crazy, but it's just enough to kind of get you like, oh crap. And again, if the movie never confirms he goes to 616, that would be like the perfect way to do it.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But I think with our surprisingly aligned predictions on the end credit of Deadpool and Wolverine, we are going to call it for our predictions. We are super, super excited to watch this movie in just a few days. And it's going to be incredible, I hope, because the hype has been hyping and the people who have seen it are pumped, or at least the previews have said that it's really, really good, which is amazing. So, with that being said, make sure that you are following us on your podcast platform of choice. You can stay up with us as we continue to cover Deadpool. We'll do reactions. I'm sure we'll have a few episodes focusing on the movie coming out of it. So definitely check that out. You can also check out our website, which is the central hub to all things Sisters Assembled, home of the blog. So it's a great spot. Definitely check it out. And we'll see you soon for Deadpool.
You guys can also give us a follow on all of our socials, which will be linked in the show notes below. So go ahead and check us out. Also on our YouTube, specifically for our Sisters Scoop, which we do every week for the most part, which is our Marvel News Rundown for that week. So go ahead and subscribe to us there as well. And T said it. We are ready for Deadpool. We are ready to continue coverage for however many weeks it'll take us to talk about everything that happens in this movie. We cannot wait. We hope you guys can't wait either. We have our tickets. We also hope you guys have yours. And we'll see you on the other side of Deadpool and Wolverine. As always, Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.